Hey, I'm Luigi, a member of the Teenage Advisory Board with the Harrow County Library System, and I'm also partnered with the chspyoneers, a school-based club. And today I will go over with you an important concept in Python called function. So what is a function? A function is similar to a magic box. You put in something, but something else was outputted. And the method we use in programming are all some sort of a function, such as point, split, map, pop, zip, eval, and etc. Basically, everything we use in Python that end with a parenthesis are some sort of a function. So the format to create a function is by having a def followed by name of the function and a parenthesis, end with a semicolon, and you will have all your code for the function under it. The reason why we use a function is because function can help you save a lot of space, since you can call it many times. Also, you will have to make the function before you call the function, and I will show you what I mean by that by writing the code. So first, you will have a def and the name of the function with a parenthesis and a semicolon. Then inside the function, we will have, for example, hi. Then you can call the function by just having the name of the function and a parenthesis. As you can see right here, you have to point out the code inside the function. And I will show you what I mean by have to make the function before you call the function. So if we put a function, for example, under where we call the function. Now you can see we have an error. This is because the program didn't know what the func means since we define the function at the next line. So we have to define the function before we call the function. So what if we want to have variables inside the function? Then you will use a parameter. A parameter is what you can use to add a variable outside of the function. Variables made by the parameters will only owned by the function. It will not change anything outside of the function. The format to create a function with parameter is just have the name of the parameter inside the parenthesis when we define the function. So now I will show you how to use them. So first, let's say we want to make an add function with variable x and y. So you have point x plus y. And let's call the function. You can see it does not work since we have not defined x and y yet. So how do we define the parameter? Just have the volume of the parameter when you call the function, like 10 plus 12. Now you can see 10 plus 12 is of course is 22, and you have point out 22. So what if you want to end the function when it meets certain condition, or you want to set the function equals to an element or elements? Then you will use a return statement. The return statement can stop the function and can also set the function equals to the element after the return statement. So how do you use a return? The format to use a return is only have a return space and the element that you want to set the function equals to. The return statement cannot be used outside the function. It can return more than one volume in the function by using a comma to separate them. It will be returned as a tuple. Return is different compared to point. Since return will only give a volume, you will need something to receive the element. And now I will show you how to use a return. So for example, you want to make a function that will get all the even numbers inside of the list. So first, let's have a new list to receive all the even numbers. Then have a for loop to get all the numbers inside the list with the if statement to compare if the numbers is an even number or not. Then we will use the append method to add the numbers into our new list. Then at the end, we'll use the return to reset the function equals to our new list. And then we will call the function with a point. And let's have a list from 1 to 9. And run the program. As you can see, only 2, 4, 6, 8 have been pointed out, and that they are all even numbers. And now I will show you a very cool thing about a function, which is called recursive. The format for recursive is just call the function with a return inside of the function. Recursive is the basic of almost all the algorithm. For a recursive, it's very similar to a loop, which means you will need to end it. I will show you what I mean by that. So first, let's have a function called sum with a parameter x. Then we will use a return x minus 1 and x plus sum. And for this, we will get the sum of, for example, if x equals 10, then we'll get the sum of 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus until plus 10. But with a recursive, we'll need to end it. So we'll use the if statement. If x equals 1, return 1 instead of keep calling the function. So when x reaches 1, it will end the recursive. And then put the recursive inside of the else. And now let's see if the function works. Point sum. Let's see, sum of 10. And you can see we get 55, which is 1 plus 2 plus 3 until plus 10. And this is how a recursive works. And now let's do a practice problem. So what you need to do is write a Python function to multiply all the numbers in a list, and then return its volume. Then use the point statement to point out the result. Pause the video and try it out. The answer will be at the next slide. Now let's see the answer. First, you will define a function with a parameter. Then you will have an integer called total with a for loop to get all the numbers inside of the list of the parameter. Then you will multiply the number with the total and then return the total. At the end, you will call the function with a list inside it and use the point method to point out the result. And if you are using the same numbers as me, 8, 2, 3, -1, and 7, then you will get an answer like -336. If you didn't get the same result, then you might need to fix your code. And that's the end of this video. Keep learning more Python by watching our future videos. If you have any questions, email us at chspyoneers@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. Bye.